You see, something's going to happen.
What? What's going to happen?
Something wonderful.
What?
I understand how you feel. You see, it's all very clear to me now.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. Today we got some OGs with us, people who haven't been on in a while or on as often. Today we got returning with us Teresa, the spiritual gangster. What is going on, Teresa? How's it been?
Hey, it's been good. It's been busy, but good. Yes. Thank you.
Of course. And thank you for joining us. Do you want to plug anything? Mention anything?
Yeah, sure. So I've been really busy doing some handmade stuff, which is what I've done for a long time. But I have this new thing, which you're kindly letting me plug on here. It's called Silly Pops. So if anyone's into like sensory stuff, like slime, picky pads, I don't know if anyone's heard of that. So basically what I've made is this thing right here. Hold on. You can see it on the camera. If you're watching on video, I'm holding it up. So it's like a silicone puck, and it's got all these like beads and charms and like different textures inside. It's very squishy. There we go. It's very squishy and very fun. And when the fun part is when you pop everything out, it's like super satisfying, just like when you play with slime, right? So in the kit though, I include like string and like a keychain thing. So you can like actually make something with it. So you're not just like squishing stuff and then putting it back in the jar. You can actually do stuff like make a keychain, bracelet, charm. So if you have kids who are into sensory things, I know a lot of like autistic children or ADHD. It's really good for keeping them busy, like a fidget toy. So yeah, I'm doing that right now. I'm in a couple stores, which is great. Some markets coming up. So if you're in like the Toronto area, come see me. And on Instagram, it's at Silly Pop Shop, and it's on Etsy under Silly Pop Shop as well. So yeah. Thanks for letting me do my thing.
Hell yeah. No, of course. No, of course. That shit, I think that shit it's awesome. Been checking out everything you've been posting. It's awesome. Good for you. And thank you for joining us today. It's been a while. You know, always look forward to Robbie, story time with Robbie. And it was
story time with Robbie Marks. I can't miss that.
Hell yeah. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much. And links for her and Spiritual Gangsters will be down in the bottom anyway, as well.
Thank you.
And Phrygian the Ninja. What is going on, sir?
Thank you, Cardinal. Sorry, I couldn't figure out my mic for a second. Yeah, thank you so much. That's so cool to hear that Teresa's doing that. So
thanks.
Yeah, big support and shout out to that, because that's really amazing to like do a brand and a product. And I know it's a lot of work. So
it is.
Amazing.
It's good though. It's enjoyable.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool.
Shit looks like it's like belongs in the store. It's pretty impressive.
That'd be great.
I try. Thank you.
Eye appeal is key.
Oh, so Jen, you want to plug your
Yeah, sorry about that. So you can find me at Wukong Reborn, WKONG Reborn. My show is called Threshold Saints. Obviously, Robbie and Nick were a big part of that they were the part of the Book of Enoch series. Obviously, Robbie was the storyteller for that, and Nick and I were kind of the captive audience / extra commentators. So thank you so much, guys, for doing that. That was like the first Robbie Marx series on my feed. So really cool to have done that and made that full journey. So thank you so much.
Hell yeah. Thank you very much. I enjoyed that as well. And we got Lisa, the Occult Reject Mad Scientist. How are you?
Good. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to be on with Robbie Marks Story Time. I hear all the amazing things about it. So this is my first story time with Robbie. So I'm very, very excited. The only thing I need to plug is the occultresearchinstitute.org. Some of the rejects have contributed to the website content in literary form. So check us out there on occultresearchinstitute.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And we got the Cosmic Peach, Julia herself. What is going on? How are you?
What's up? This is my first story time too, and I couldn't ask for a better crew of people to do it with. We got Teresa, Lisa, Robbie, Jen. Oh my goodness, this is a dream team. Yeah, Cosmic Peach podcast, you know the drill, but excited to be here. Robbie, looking forward to it.
It's nice.
All right. So we got Robbie Marx. What is going on, sir? We're going to be talking about the origins of Addis. So let everybody know, too, like where they can find all your stuff and your art and everything, please.
Yeah, and for those who don't know who I am, I'm an artist, man who doing professional art for 35 years for various bands, festivals, mom and pop shops, logos, anything anybody really needs. And basically, I just grind away at that. And while I'm doing that, I have books going in the background, and I'm constantly researching and taking notes. And I build these databases of these various notes. And kind of today, before that, I was going to say, if you want to find all my stuff, you can go to my link tree, which is Linktree RMARX, and that'll pull up everything for me as far as my website, my Etsy, my Patreon, my podcast. Everything you want to find is going to be there. So, but today we're going to cover the origins of Addis. This character, he's a Phrygian character, and this ties back into some of the earliest origins of the mystery schools.
That is awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know anything about it, so I'm already looking forward to it. So I guess kick it off. So wherever you like to start, please.
Now, when we go into the Egyptians, the pre-Sauron, they acknowledge the fact that the Phrygians were a nation that was older even than the Egyptians, right? And Josephus says that the Phrygians were founded by the biblical figure of Togarma. And this Togarma is basically in the line of Noah. He's associated with the line of Japhet and the people of Anatolia, which in that line we also find Cadmus, who is the one that brought the writing and the characters into ancient Greece from the east, right? And it's also generally associated with the line of the Hebrew people and the foundations of Armenia. So now the Phrygians, they are possibly Thracians, settling in the northwestern Anatolia in the late 2nd millennia BC upon the disintegration of the Hittite kingdom. So this is a really old kind of, when we get into the Sumerians, we've talked about the Sumerians before in regard to their culture. It just emerges out of nothing, just full form. And they have, writers and actors and doctors and surgeons and like cookbooks, and they already have methods of accounting and bookkeeping. And so, they just kind of appear out of nothing as this full form. And this is after the deluge. And you kind of get into, with the Sumerian kings lists, it's basically the pre-Diluvian kings before the global flood. And they have a character very similar to Noah, which is Zasudra. And so this kind of ties in with the Western ideas of the Bible and Judaism and this idea of the global flood. And they are a post-flood kind of society, right? Now, the Phrygians moving to the Central Highlands, founding their capital of Gordium with an important religious center at Midas City. So this is where we get King Midas, is in ancient Phrygia, right? Yeah, exactly. Herodotus of Halicarnassus tells us that the Phrygians were in fact Thracian Brigians who had once crossed the Hellespont in the histories, also telling us that the Phrygians are the parents of the Armenian people. So this ties in with Armenians again. Let's see now, Arnobius considered Addis to be a Lydian word meaning young man, right? So this Addis character, he's kind of this supplicant of the goddess Kibele. And kind of is madly in love with her. And this is basically the foundations of the Phrygian mystery schools, which when you see ancient Phrygia, you see the revolution, like the Papa Smurf type hat.
I was going to ask, the Phrygian cap comes from.
That's the Phrygian cap. So this is where the Phrygian cap comes from, right? That hat, it dates all the way back into the Saturnian age. Who was it? One of the ancient Saturnian, I'll remember it as we go. But he basically was the god of the pine tree, and Addis is the god of the pine tree, just like Osiris was the god of the great fir. Just so you see all these different castrated like religious figures being associated with different types of trees in the different lands as this mythology spreads, right? And it's generally because the trees, the pine tree, the fir tree, these are evergreen trees. They're symbols of everlasting life. So it's the idea that even in the winter when the snow would come, the evergreen trees would still stay green and would be the only color you would see in the wintertime, much like where I live here in New Hampshire. So this was basically this idea of the afterlife and the possibility of the individual soul moving into a higher form and living into eternity. Whereas, when you look at a lot of the ancient cultures, they believe that you would die and go to a holding place or a middle ground or some sort of a place to wait for the end of time. Whereas this is an emerging thought form that is basically bringing about this idea of higher ascended levels of being, in much like you see in some Judaism, certain sects of Judaism don't believe in an afterlife, whereas others do. And then you have the Christians in regard to Jesus, opening the way for everyone to ascend into the heavens. So you see this evolving idea, going back, I would say upwards of at least 10 to 12,000 years. We have documented evidence of this evolving thought form, right? Let's see. Now, Arnobius considered Addis to be a Lydian word, meaning young man. I said that, right? And others believe that Addis to be derived from the Phrygian Attis, which means goat, right? So there's this idea within Addis of this, his name directly relates to the goat, and he is raised and fed by goats, just like once you get to the Greek mythologies in relation to Addis and Agdistis, Zeus himself was also fed by a goat when he was hidden away. This goat, Amathea, that basically they end up slaughtering, and the different parts become these sacred objects in Greek mythology.
I have a quick question for you, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this character, this is like a mystical being, or does he have like any divine or supernatural abilities, or was he more like a prophet type of person?
Right. That's a good question. When you look back at Addis, he's sprung forth by Mother Kibele, and she is an androgyne. This gets into the virgin births, right? As far as Mother Mary being a virgin birth, and just so you have this idea of parthenogenesis is really what it is, and parthenogenesis is the idea that within certain animal kingdoms, certain species can inseminate themselves and basically create their own children. And this happens in amphibians, this happens in snakes, this happens in, there is a botanist in Sweden named Lynn Cantrell that wrote a whole book on parthenogenesis. And she estimates that after the Great Flood, that humanity was in such a state of chaos that it's like when the horseshoe crab raises its tail in the ocean, and the hormones that are in the water tell them how many boys and how many girls there are, and it tells them how to, whether to make more boys or more girls to stabilize the population. That there's this idea that humanity and the genetics were in such distress that women began to inseminate themselves and have these
really
offspring. Oh yeah. So, and this is but it directly ties into the idea of these virgin births, of these And if you figure and you take the woman's genetics, and she has everything to reproduce, the male just basically provides some variability in the equation as far as so you don't get too much repetition and mutation. But if you take the pure genetics of the same programming and combine them together, the idea, at least within my mind, is that you're creating these vessels that are of a different frequency, that are more open to higher energies kind of subsiding within them. So, basically this Addis character, being an offspring of the androgyne mother Kibele, is a mortal man. He's not immortal, but at the same time, he's the offspring of the gods, and he's like higher ascended form. So he's the supplicant, and he loves Mother Kibele. So basically, he devotes his life to her he becomes a priest, basically, or a priestess of Mother Kibele at one point.
Do you find it interesting that it's kind of like you were saying with the evolution of people thinking about the afterlife, and how you mentioned most of them believed that you had to go to this purgatory resting place, and then it was out of nowhere, there was a surge of higher thinking, maybe we don't go to some weird locker room in the middle of the earth, maybe we do go to heaven or something like that. Do you feel like it wasn't just Addis, but many characters around the same time kind of ascended us into that thinking?
For sure, but Addis is the oldest documented form that we have.
Okay, all right.
Right, whereas most of these characters that we look at within the ancient times, from Osiris to Nimrod to Tammuz to Adonis, these are all characters that are in the 3000 to 1000 BC area, whereas Mother Kibele and Addis go back about 10,000 BC.
Okay, so this is one of the OG.
Right. Which
okay.
Is basic, but at the same time, you can trace Mother Kibele or Kibele or Sybil. You can trace her all the way back to Ishtar, Inanna. And Inanna is probably the early, whereas Addis is probably the earliest form of this male, transcendent figure. But Kibele, you can trace all the way back to Inanna, which, and Mother Kibele, her grand secret, I'll just spill it in the beginning, is that she is an androgyne. She is the great hermaphrodite, right? And if you trace that back to Inanna was very much a transgender figure too. It's spoken of that from the Library of Ashurbanipal, where we get the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? They basically speak of Inanna going into the ale room or the pub or the bar, and basically she is a woman on one side, and when she's talking to a man, and she's a man on the other side when she's talking to a woman. And in the ancient festivals of Inanna, they would actually dress in garb and we see this in the MTV Music Awards with Madonna and Britney Spears, where she dresses half and half in half man and half woman's clothing. This goes all the way back to ancient Inanna and the earliest records of this hermaphroditism.
So do you think that's why the transgenderism or gender fluidity thing is kind of sacred? Not even with the Baphomet, the breasted goat or whatever. Right. And we kind of see society in general is kind of leaning towards that a little bit, recently. Yeah. But so it's part of the mystery school thing. It's
oh yeah,
that's the upper echelon. If you can get yourself to the point where you're not masculine or feminine, you're just a being that floats somewhere in the middle. That's the highest you can get, right?
Right. And that goes back to before, there's ancient tales of the hermaphrodite that was basically when the sexes were split by Zeus in Greek mythology. You go back into some of the old Hindu texts, and they have tales of groups of androgyne beings that basically kind of faded away because they weren't able to produce very well. You see this and even what was it? I believe Indra was kind of a center type energy that was neither male nor female. So you kind of, and it's just in regard to the creation. What it comes down to is the creation of life without the sexual act.
I was just going to ask that. Do you think that Kibele, whatever, I always viewed her as not so much as a hermaphrodite, but that it was a representation of parthenogenesis.
Yes.
And that it was the alchemical wedding that all the alchemists achieve to master.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it wasn't something. I feel like it was taken and adulterated. Or bastardized,
Totally.
but
Well,
it
not understood.
in art form. You can only say so much. You can only draw so much, right? And wings indicate flight. You can't draw something in the air, because you're only, two-dimensional with art. And I felt like Kibele, whatever, was a representation of trying to indicate a virgin birth, parthenogenesis, and what you said with parthenogenesis, you get such little variability. It's almost like a clone of the mother because it's all of the genetics of the mother.
Yes.
Right. Even if you mix up the genetics and you get, whatever type of combination, you're still dealing with all of the mother. And when you don't have that secondary input of variability, it leads to genetic bottlenecking. And so what we see is hybrid vigor and biodiversity sustains any population. But you're absolutely right in that there was a time where parthenogenesis had to exist because there was no other way. But to piggyback off of that, and I don't mean to belabor this, but you're with Addis, he was her son, wasn't he?
Yes.
Right? So is this somewhat of a reversal storyline? I don't know if you're familiar with the story of Adam and Eve at the end of the book.
Yep.
How Eve was Adam's daughter, and it was through copulation with his daughter that he created the rest of humanity after the flood. It almost seems like it's a reversal of the story, almost.
And is in regard to having sex within your own family. I think that maybe those stories were generally shifted where within alchemical, you have Adam and Eve growing apart from each other like cartilage from a single being in the form of like cellular reproduction, right? Whereas in the biblical scape, you have them taking a piece of man's rib and creating her through a sort of cloning, but nonetheless, yes, it very much, you have this, and you see this often as well with the mother goddesses like Isis marrying Horus, who is the offspring of Osiris. So she's marrying her son. You have this constant incestuous kind of thing going on for the production of these quote unquote, divine lines once they're incarnated into the physical realm. And it's, almost like the necessary function of bringing forth civilization, in order to produce as much as possible.
Well, it sounds like,
thing.
Sorry, go ahead, Lisa. No, finish.
No, just one more point and I'm done. It almost, if you think about it and you remove the whole, pedophilia and just remove that, put it on the shelf for now, for the sake of explanation. If you think about parthenogenesis and you think about a virgin birth, it is a clone of the mother, just in version of a male. So you're taking female DNA of the mother and transforming it into male. She is pretty much having sex with herself as a male.
Right.
And so it no longer, and I'm not by no means like condoning all that other stuff. I'm just saying, if you think about it biologically, she's having intercourse with herself in a male version.
Yep.
And therefore to propagate the species.
Yes, the
I
divine.
don't know if that helps or whatever, but
No, for sure. And that's why this stuff is so interesting to look at, because it challenges the foundational ideas of creation. It helps us try to understand further how we were created, why we're here, which is the ultimate questions. Who are we and why are we here? So these are like foundational ideas that, are the breadbasket of humanity as far as our own histories. They give us a greater understanding of ourselves,
Well, I was going to say, it just sounds like the practices that, these elite families continue today.
Do today.
100.
So
100.
it's like, this is what the
Which
gods
is
were
developed.
doing.
Yes.
If they consider themselves of these elite bloodlines, they continue the same practices is very interesting.
Right.
And also, what Julia was touching on before, it sounds like the ancient way of like honoring the hermaphrodite is very like asexual, right? Like it's not really like a huge, it's not
about
emphasized.
sex. It's not about pleasure.
It's not emphasized. Whereas like, the modern day, let's say pride movements, alphabet peoples, whatever. It's like taking on this like inversion of it or like bastardization of it,
It's like a mockery of it.
Yeah,
honestly,
it's like a mockery of it, I don't know. I just find that interesting.
Yeah. But we find with Addis, and I got a couple stories here, but in one story he climbs to the top of Mount Agdistis, and he's basically in shame, and he castrates himself. In another, he's getting married to this Lydian queen, and Mother Kibele shows up, and he goes insane and castrates himself. And this all comes down to the idea of Attis's supplication to Kibele, but not in a sexual manner. It cuts off the sex. It's higher than tantra, or it's higher than in a way it is a certain sort of tantra in completely limiting the sex to zero.
Yes.
And all bodily lusts and pleasures in association with what that part of the nervous system brings.
Yeah, I've said it multiple times on the show. I'm sure Teresa, Jen, and Lisa have heard it. Probably you, Julia, maybe not so much because she's just newer. She hasn't heard me bring this up multiple times, but I've said it before. I think even looking at the tree of life, if you want to ascend the tree and have a magical experience, I do think you are like the two energies working together, but like you said, not in an actual sexual way at all. I think it is basically in a way of like unfucking yourself, really. Yeah. And it's pretty much taking your DNA and twisting it to, it looks like a ladder, and then you climb that.
Jacob's ladder.
Yes. Yeah. And the two energies work together, and that's why they do start to split, which is why I think you always see the hermaphrodite one side and one side. Right. Because once you ascend the tree.
That's actually really interesting to me.
Which is why in spirit, I don't think angels can fuck, right? I mean, do they have dicks and vaginas?
No.
Well, they're associated with like, some of them are being masculine
or
in
very
way
androgynous too.
Right, because it's like Michael and Uriel, and like they have Gabriel, Raphael. Those are like masculine names. But I mean, do angels really? I mean, if you go with the Nephilim story, the fallen angels, they were very interested in getting freak nasty,
Yeah.
But in a sense, to me, I've always thought that like mysticism was to transcend out of your physical body as far as like wanting sex and wanting like it because when you have sex, the act itself traps you in this physical body, and you're very identifying with it.
Right. It's your lowest root chakra that grounds you and pulls you down. And like there's a story of this golden flower, right? That I think it was Gilgamesh. He dove down, or the golden flower directly relates with Gilgamesh. But Gilgamesh dove down to retrieve this golden flower of immortality, and he was going to eat it. But before he came back up, before he could eat it, a serpent came and ate it. And it's basically the idea that he exerted all of his force through sexual energy and lost the rising tide that led to immortality because of the serpent, because of the sexuality, you know. So yeah, this is definitely.
I wonder if the fallen angel situations might have been more of an energetic sexuality, not like a literal.
I'm wondering.
I think
one.
it's. I think that's when you
I'm
actually start
wondering.
using the physical to create.
Yeah.
I think to
Well,
get
and-
real deep, I think that's when the eyeball. I think it's just also a description of when the eyeballs take on, and you actually fall in love and create with this outside world instead of inside.
Right. Now, in the Bible, speaking to what you were just talking about, as far as energy, now the Bible specifically says that they came into them. So you can,
I was just gonna say that.
yeah, but it
Like
could
busted hot nuts.
Isn't it?
well,
Well, no,
but it's CAME, right?
Yeah, like
it-
that
you
could
can
be an
interpret it both
energetic
ways,
thing.
but it could be their energies came
Yeah.
into them.
So-
and
Ward,
occupied
like
them.
join, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
Like possession. Oh my
Possession.
god.
No, more like quicksilver. Like they're
Yeah.
filling the vessel with
Yes.
the energy. Like
Exactly.
Teresa is exactly saying
Quicksilver.
that, and like we're trying to talk about in the chat. It's
Pump
more
stuff.
energetic. You have to.
Yeah.
It's not literal. That's the mistake a
Yeah.
lot of conspiracy people make. I'm not saying any of us. None of us. We're all high IQ.
Yeah.
But
well, I
a
know
lot
I
of
used to think it was more literal, but now
But that-
I definitely did. I thought they
Yeah.
were just blowing loads all over these chicks and just getting them all pregnant.
But that
I'm
gave
serious.
them the lineage
Like-
of the men of great renown, of the kingly
Mhm,
line.
mhm.
Of
You
the
get one,
royalty
you get one.
below, you know, so yeah.
but I think also, isn't it like during conception, when you have that explosion between the spermatozoa and the ovum, you have the opportunity to capture energy and transform it and fix it into matter. And
Right.
so when I heard that, you have these angels that are coming in, instead of the matrix, the matriz of the woman,
Right.
capturing energy and bringing it into her and capturing it into matter, the angels came in and basically was like, no, I'm putting my energy instead
Energy
of hers
Instead of
calling
the-
forth.
Yes.
Right. Like they
Okay.
played that interception game and,
Right.
foul on the play, and then
Right.
was like, nah, I'm putting my energy in that. And the same concept happens with cloning, in that you get an immortalized cell, say it's mine, and you want to make a clone of Nick. So you basically keep the outer portion of the cell, and you take out my DNA and you insert his.
Right.
And so you're basically housing Nick's DNA inside my cellular membrane.
Mm-hmm.
And then
So
my
it's just a
cellular
vessel.
membrane is activating
The
Nick's
progenitor.
DNA to now start to replicate. All you need is a housing unit, which
Yeah.
is the outside of the cell,
like
and then
the whole
transfer
sorry,
the DNA. Do
like
what?
the
No, go
Holy
ahead.
Spirit supposedly like did to Mary.
Yep.
Mhm.
Oh,
Very much.
Teresa.
We don't think
Yeah.
of that story as sexual. I don't.
Yeah.
personally.
I don't.
I know.
But
Because
so,
it's not.
at all.
It's
so
the
why
act without sex. This
Exactly.
is what we're talking
why
about.
would we think the fallen angels was sexual? It could just be the same
Mm.
situation.
Dude,
So
I know
cloning is
JJ
not
Vance
sexual.
is not here, but this is a barn burner. I'm
Oh, yeah,
already
he was
learning
supposed to.
fucking
He's
There's a
ton
lot of
stuff.
Mormon.
He's on the
There's a lot of
on
Mormon
the-
things
Yeah.
in this.
Interesting
There's-
service.
You can see the dialectical errors. I'm just going to be honest. There you can see the errors that Mormonism kind of makes with this. They kind of always bring it back down to Netzach, and that's like their prime focus. But and like Lisa's saying, it's super important. But there has to be something with Hod. There has to be something with Yesod. It has to happen in synthesis. It's not in polarity, right? It's like in synthesis. That's what this is all about. And to go off Lisa's point, Teresa, you'll know this, but Ganesh, or Ganapati as we call him in Buddhism, he is the son that is only begotten by the mother. Now, when she creates him, she does use the story, as the story goes, she does use some of the seeds or the quicksilver from Shiva, but he didn't know that he took it from her. So it's like in ignorance. So it's not really his son. It's only begotten by the mother. So that's I think a really interesting parallel.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And what was it? Inanna. I'll get into it here in a little bit, but yeah, after Addis had castrated himself, the blood that fell on the ground, right? It produced a tree that grew in real time and put forth fruit instantly, right? And the goddess basically saw this beautiful tree full of fruit and picked up in some tales it's a pomegranate, in other tales it's an almond, and basically was holding them, gathering them and holding them in her bosom. And one of them went into her and basically created, parthenogenesis. So you see this over and over again. And in some of the Eastern tales, one more thing. And in some of the Eastern tales, you get this story of a beam of sunlight coming and they would basically keep the children off the floor until they hit puberty. So they were in between heaven and earth. And if they touched the earth, they were polluted, right? But a beam of sunlight would come in and basically inseminate her without the act of sex. Go ahead, Lisa.
When you say castration, are you just, I don't mean to be graphic, but I genuinely want to know, are you just removing the testicles, or are you removing the testicles and urethra?
Ooh.
I'm assuming you're moving the whole. If you look at the Templars.
Okay, so it's a complete mutilation.
Yeah. If you look at the highest levels of the Templars that castrated themselves that are in France, their pattern of castration is basically 2 circles on the bottom and 1 circle. So when you see these 3 circles,
like a Mickey Mouse,
kind of, like if you invert it becomes a Mickey Mouse. Yes, yeah, for sure. You
guys are killing it today, man. I'm already sitting over here like, what the fuck?
See, this is what story time is all about.
This is the ancient mysteries, though, and it's all around us. It's in everything that has pervaded into modern times. Mm-hmm. So, recognizing these ancient symbols gives you a broader understanding of the world you're living in.
Well, I just wanted to say real quick, since Lisa brought it up, like the Heaven's Gate cult was really into this kind of ambiguous gendering, shave your head, wear matching clothing, and then it got to the point where it was like castration. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It's like it's very significant in cults, and so I'm blown away, you guys. This is crazy.
So now the oldest reference to the mysterious character of Addis appears on a monument to King Midas, and he calls him Ates, A-T-E-S. And Herodotus calls him Attis, A-T-U-S, as well as Attis, A-T-U-S. Oh, that's the same. In Xanthisus of Lydia. Whereas the first time we see, this is the first in Lydia is the first time that we see the double T put in is A-T-T-I-S. And that's from these Athenian cosmic poets from around 350 BC, which became the most popular spelling of it thereafter. Let's see, according to, hold on, I didn't highlight that one. Let's see. So now Ovid, are you guys familiar with Ovid at all?
A little
bit. He basically has this book called Metamorphoses. And in Metamorphoses, he goes through all of these different characters in the different mysterious religious cults that transform from one thing into another, right? So Ovid conveys that young Addis had fallen in love with the beautiful Kibele, who made him a promise that he would remain a boy forever. But soon Addis broke his promise, falling in love with the river nymph, Stagaritis. And this is a Phrygian river, basically, that was said to be occupied by this river god. And the offspring of that river god was this nymph. And Kibele took revenge in killing the nymph, causing Addis to lose his mind, with Addis fearing the Furies that were in pursuit of him. To escape the perceived terrors, Addis climbed to the top of Mount Dindymon, where he castrated himself. So let's see. But the Ovid doesn't so much tell us how Addis was born, right? Let's see. So in A Passion of Love, Jupiter, who is Zeus in Roman times, he basically approaches this Mount Agdistis. So the goddess is the mountain itself, right? And when you go back into these ancient mystery schools, they always worshipped on the high places. They would circumambulate the mountains to the left-hand side, basically in alignment with the pole star. And they believe this was the connection out of the dome or out of the glass onion into the higher realms, right? Let's see.
Isn't the pole star associated with that? Where we've now come to the swastika because the pole star was at the center of it, being orbited by the dippers.
Right. And those dippers, you go through the different cultures, in the Egyptians, they saw them as ox legs. Or no, it was Nana in that story. They saw them as ox legs. Maybe it was Egyptian too. But then you have the mother bear and you have to the Druids, it was the scythe as far as, which has to do with life and death and moving between, realms. Let's see. So
can I ask a quick question about the story you just read?
Yeah.
Sometimes when I hear these stories, it's like reading the Bible and I need like a little bit more translation. Just pretend I'm a retard. It's not hard to do.
Yeah.
So you saying he fell in love with somebody, but then he didn't want to be with them and then he castrated himself, or like what happened with that?
Right. If you get deeper into the Lydian stories that relate to where Ovid got his information from, they talk about the fact that Kibele and Addis had fallen in love with one another, even though they couldn't make love with one another. And that what ended up happening was Addis, because he was such a beautiful youth, he was like, everyone that saw him fell in love with him. He like Adonis. This is where we get the story of Adonis, because he was so beautiful, everyone loved him, right? So one of the kings basically had commissioned Adonis to marry his daughter, and then it was Kibele that came to the marriage. And when he saw her at the marriage, he went into a rage and basically broke down, leading to his self-castration in dedication to the goddess mother Kibele, in his own mother Kibele.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So let's see. Now in Passion. Oh, did I turn it back? So in A Passion of Love, Jupiter approaches Mount Agdistis, which is the mountain, which appears in the likes of, and here they're relating it to Mother Rhea, because all these goddesses tie in together. Isis, Mother Rhea, Kibele. There's numerous inscriptions that talk about the fact that they call her, what do they call her? Meronymus is what they call her, where she is the mother of many names. And she basically, in each culture she goes into, she takes on a different personification of this divine mother that transmits a androgyne, birth, that of a sort of a prophet figure that leads the way to show you the exit method out of this realm, right?
What is that? What is that animal? Sorry to interrupt. What is that animal behind this woman?
That looks like a black ox.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. And it's like, again, how we're talking about like all the birth and everything and the twisting of the crossing of the stuff. I mean, you get an O and an X. I mean, the O would be the
and the X O and the X is six in English.
And also you need oxygen to live in this realm.
OX, yep.
Interesting.
XOXO, guys.
And I guess in the English language, the only places you see 66 or 666 is in ox and fox. So that's interesting.
Ox is very solar.
Yeah,
very. It makes sense for Tiferatic, right? Like very Tiferatic, kind of Luciferic, almost element.
Right.
Getting close to it.
Yeah, for sure. So now let's see. But Mount Agdistis, basically the mother goddess as the mountain, she does not wish to give in to the advances of Jupiter, right? In the ensuing struggle, Jupiter sheds some drops of his semen, where they are spilled over the mountain. which conceived from his divine insemination. The result is a terrible and wild androgynous creature that is born that they call Agdistis. So Agdistis, as the deeper I got into this, the more I realized that this Agdistis is Mother Kibele. And then I began to find links where they were actually, and when you get into the more Eastern, like Iranian texts, they call, they directly match Agdistis with Mother Kibele, right? So now the gods saw this androgyny as a menace, a thing from the past, from before the splitting of the sexes that we talked about, right? And they feared that it was this one person with the quality of two sexes that would be enabled to multiply without a partner, also relating to the parthenogenesis of the virgin births, which we talked about, this constituting a threat to both the gods and to man. But the gods said they would not outright go and put an end to Agdistis, right? So basically, as the gods look down, they see this place where Agdistis enjoys the cool shade and the springs of the fresh water where she quenches his thirst. And the gods then invoke the participation of Dionysus at this point, right? And Dionysus is sent to mix wine with the spring water. And Dionysus basically accepts this task. And Dionysus basically said to accept this task so that he can gain immortality, right? So Dionysus puts the wine into the spring water where Agdistis drinks, and then Agdistis, drinking healthily from the water, basically falls asleep, passes out from drinking the wine. And then at this time, Dionysus steals up to Agdistis while she's sleeping, and basically takes a stout cord, is what they say, and affixes it to the genitals of Agdistis. And then when Agdistis wakes up, quote unquote, it deprives of that which made him a man. So then, according to Arnobius, a tree shoots up from the spilled blood in real time and bears fruit. This just as in the story of Inanna that happens, or Nana walking past that we talked about before, right? And
Robbie, just real quick, I mentioned it in the chat before, since you brought it up again. I could be like a little off, but the story with the tree and the blood and the tree sprouting from it sounds very much like parts of that movie, The Fountain.
The Fountain. Oh yeah.
That has a guy from the X-Men in it. Yeah,
and you see this within mysticism, because what was it, Athena, when she created the freshwater spring before Athens was formed, and she also caused an almond tree to grow in real time and bear fruit before everyone. That's why they elected her and named the island Athena. You see these mystical trees growing in real time in different places. And even now, if you go to India, and you read Madame Blavatsky, or you read, some of the mystics that have gone over into India, they talk about the yogis basically growing trees in real time that bear fruit. So this is something within mysticism that dates, as far back as we can go into the systems.
Yeah. Interesting story. When you were telling that, I was like, why does this sound like The Fountain?
Yeah.
I don't remember if it was her blood or his blood, but I think blood was dropped and a tree grew and there was blood coming out of the tree and he was eating it. I don't know, some old weird shit.
Right.
Eating the bark. It was
yeah. And how's the director going to interpret symbols and inflect them in his own, renderings? It's,
I think that movie is deep as hell. Very Gnostic. I think one of the lines in it that hit me the last time I saw it, I think he says, in death there is awe. It's like, motherfucker nailed it right there.
So now, at this time, because she's pregnant, basically the goddess Kibele, she comes to send Garios, basically this river, the father of the river nymph. But Sangarius doesn't understand the significance of the divine intervention as far as the parthenogenesis, and this we have in the story of Enoch, Melchizedek, where Melchizedek's father, doesn't understand how his wife is pregnant. We have this with Joseph and Mary. We have this, in various parthogenic births where the husband's like, in Jesus and Mary, he did understand, but in this story, the husband doesn't understand. And they basically leave this divine child when it's birthed in a field as a foundling, just for nature to take it. And again, a goat comes and basically, feed this young child, just like Zeus was fed by Amalthea. And then later on, these shepherds find Addis and basically raise him up as a shepherd of the field. So this is one of our first shepherd-like figures, and we see him carrying the goats over his shoulders like Jesus carries the lambs over his shoulders. Oh yeah. Wow. And it ties in with the various like Tammuz, and Tammuz carried the goats like that as well. But he was the progenitor of the fields. He could make grass grow at a word, make springs come at a word, various divine intonations. But it's when Addis grows up, unbeknownst to Mother Kibele, that basically when he comes of age and he's like this beautiful child like Adonis, that this is when Kibele falls in love with him. And basically, and this, this whole idea of the mother falling in love with the son castrating himself, devoting himself to the mother, this all relates into because when we get into Mother Kibele, and I didn't want to talk about her so much, but she was generally worshipped on this mountain as a black stone, right? So the black stone, this was a meteorite that was said to come, and the goddess incarnating herself into our physical world. You got something, Nick?
Oh yeah, when you're done, yeah.
But basically, we can see these meteorite stones being worshipped in several places, like in the corner of the Kaaba in Mecca. But nonetheless, this black stone, it gets commissioned to be taken to Rome because Virgil, in his book, the Aeneid, basically Aeneas goes back to Phrygia and ties the foundations of Rome to ancient Phrygia, where Addis, that's what the Aeneid, the epic story that basically details the foundation of Rome, is all about, is this character of Aeneas going to ancient Phrygia and basically going to worship the goddess mother and tying the foundations of Rome to ancient Phrygia, which we're talking about. Right. So they end up commissioning and bringing that black stone from Phrygia and bringing it to the Palatine Hill in Rome. And she becomes the mother of all the gods over all of the Roman religion. So they bring this Phrygian goddess that offshoot Addis, and she becomes the supreme goddess of ancient Rome. So just in context of this whole storyline, right?
I just wanted, Robbie, now I just wanted to interrupt before about, you're talking about this whole thing with like, cutting yourself, castration and eunuchs and all this stuff. I have not joked around. I've tried to make like actually like serious points with this. And, going back to the eye, so I understand that's sometimes a little bit too deep, a little bit too much. But I have referenced before, I do think the optic nerve in back of your eye looks like a dick hanging. I mean, when I've pulled up the picture, I'm not going to go through the computer now. I've showed it on podcasts, and people are like, yeah, that does look like a dick and balls. It does look like that, and it's in the back of your eye. And once you start falling down from that point into the front of your eye, that's like when you start like basically coming into birth with this world. At that point, you're still just having a relationship kind of with the pineal gland and back here. Right. You haven't hit the lens yet. nothing's gotten twisted or manipulated.
Mhm.
So yeah, I often wonder is like the loss of that is just showing you the progression of light coming into the front of your eye, basically into this
Right.
world.
Right.
Yeah, I know it's a little
It is-
much, but
Yeah, but it is interesting when you look back at the ideas that, at a certain point we couldn't see blue, at a certain point we couldn't see pink.
Yeah, and you're even
these-
changing
these are like-
fluids and everything
Yeah,
in your eye
because
at that
well,
point.
and there's a woman in Florida that they found. I don't know if I brought this up before, but she has extended rods and cones that they found, and she can see something like an extra 60 something colors that we can't see. So,
Wow.
Yo, if you look
I
at
mean-
certain Egyptian headdresses, they look just like, I can't
yeah.
remember if it's the cones or the rods, but they look just like what cones or rods look
Yeah.
like in the back of your eyeball.
Oh yeah,
Very
and
fucking
and
weird.
I mean, when you get into the sigil of Lucifer in regard to how the eyeballs work and how
Yeah, the
light
reflection
functions-
off the lens, basically. looks like.
Right. That's exactly. But that's the whole thing. It's like the evolving. Are we a continuously evolving form? You go back into the ancient mysteries, and they talk about how we just came into birth full form, like from the divine realm, and then it took however long in manifest creation before we fell into matter, or if you want to get into like the Darwinian Huxley kind of idea of, why they had to fake the Piltdown man and why they still have the quote unquote missing link. Like they can't determine or establish a true definitive point of separation from primates to humans. But geneticists also say there are some points in there where it looks like genes have been fused. So it's just interesting to think about in regard to the creation mechanisms, and all.
I just I wanted to add to something really quick, and it's Lisa actually, and then you made me think of it again. But there was a small documentary that I watched on the craziness of conception and like how impossible it really is
Yeah.
to even contemplate it. But they, I guess somehow, maybe not inside a woman, but they took a video of when the sperm actually fuses with the egg.
Yeah.
There's like, it's like the Big Bang shit,
Spark of light.
light comes off of the thing. And
Let
it's
there be
kind of
light.
like what you were saying is like, do we come from like a divine, like
Yeah.
astral plane, and it just like
Right.
explodes within? And it's like, where do people actually come from? And infants actually can only see in black and white for a while, and then they develop
Yep.
colors over time. So it's like, like an infant or even like a fetus inside the womb, it's like, where do we like the thought of it is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
where do we actually come from?
And the woman being able to actually, like a fractaline function, manufacture life from itself in all species, not just humans. But I find it interesting that within the zygote, as it develops within the womb of the human, that it basically takes on all these different class and phylum representations of the life that's existing on the planet as well. you
Yeah,
know?
It's required. The explosion is required to
Yeah.
trap energy into matter. Like
Right.
if you were just harnessing energy into matter at the molecular level, it requires that amount of burst of energy. And it's about, I think they said like 60 or 600,000 zinc ions that explode at the same time.
Yeah.
And
Crazy.
the actual lining of the ovum and the zona pellucida, that is
Right.
where the chain reaction happens. And it's a chemical, biochemical
Reaction.
process.
Alchemy.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
so funny because today I just saw a post about for the first time, like recently, they were able to make a human fetus out of just stem
Out of the-
cells,
Yeah.
right? So no egg and sperm, like literally
Right.
just repurposed stem cells.
Yeah.
And it made me think of that clip, Julia, that I think you're talking about when, the zygote, I guess, the egg gets fertilized or whatever. And then there's that huge spark of light. And I was like, well, if you're just using stem cells, would that even happen? And then, like, what is this creation that you've made? Is there any soul infused?
Right.
Right.
When would
Because
that
it's
point
postulated.
happen?
Yeah, it's postulated that when that explosion of light happens, potentially that is when the soul nests
enters.
into the spirit.
Like you said, materializes into matter, right? So like, when is that happening? And I'm like, is that even a human at that point? Like, what is that?
Right. It's like I don't know if you guys have ever watched the movie Splice, when you know she takes like her egg and puts like weird chicken DNA with it and trying to make like hybrid beings and shit. It just makes you wonder. It's that spark of light when you see it, and it's like an explosion, and it's almost like the God particle, right? You know, when you are trying to fuse those two things together to create, and then this soul comes down into this vessel, which is the mother, and then you grow it, and then it's a whole entire person. But I have also thought, and you know, I think most of you know, I kind of identify myself to be a Christian, but you know, not to say that I'm the only person that can be right, because I'm open-minded to entertaining all kinds of, you know, different theories and stuff. But doesn't it make you wonder if like the soul of the person that you grow inside you, it's like they've always been with you, and then it's like they wait for like the right time, and then they come down into the physical, but like their spirit has always been with you.
Well, within some of the Buddhist texts I've read, it's the idea that you have these souls around you, and you do this eternal dance through time, where you continue to come back so you can experience and love one another. And if those souls so much love one another that there's the potential two souls can merge and become one in purity. And also the idea that if one soul is so strong that it can actually explode and fracture and create multiple souls of itself. You know, it's you know, quite beautiful in regard to energetic, you know, precipitation. And the possibilities of what life has. And then when you get into DNA itself, right, when it twists up into its finest form, it's generating photons on its own accordance just through the nature of how. And I've postulated that the photons generating through the DNA may be the bit rate at which we experience time. That allows time to actually.
Damn, Robbie, fuck.
Absolutely.
That is intense. I got chills.
That photon exists at a specific frequency that is the fingertip of the actual individual. It is specific and unique to that individual. And so when you look at the body itself, and you look at DNA itself, and you look at the soul's frequency, they're all specific to each other, and it's like your meat suit has been outfitted to your soul's DNA, and to respond that way.
But Lisa, how can you make that in a lab? It's like that you can't, like that whatever they're doing, and it's like it can't be the same. It can't. They factored out the spiritual aspect of life, and they're just creating like weird biological vessels.
I think that's going to be the new discrimination. People that were born natural versus people that were not born natural, right? That's when you're going to have that divide. But to give credence to what we're saying, and just to kind of insert this, when you go for IVF, like if you want in vitro fertilization, obviously they harness both gametes, right? When your OBGYN is looking at insemination under a microscope, it's looking for that flash of light under the microscope. If there's embryos that produce a flash of light, those are, collected, and they are harvested, for implantation later. The ones that are not are discarded. So if you're paying upwards of $30,000 to $50,000 for your OBGYN to look for that flash of light, I think that's a big deal. I think that's
holy shit.
How can you not believe in God when you see something like that? It's just like this is crazy to me.
It's the most fun stuff to talk about for me. I mean, it's just thinking about it. So now Pausanias, he tells us that Addis, his birth, like that of many heroes, is said to have been miraculous. His mother, Nana, was a virgin who conceived by putting a ripe almond or pomegranate in her bosom. And then my note is, indeed, within the Phrygian culture and their cosmology, right, the almond figured as the father of all things. So this is the father and the mother and the offspring. This is the divine trinity that you see in all the Egyptian, gnomes of the 12 gnomes, that transitions into the various mystery schools that we see coming forth in the mystery of Jesus Christ himself, Yeah.
Something I wanted to say earlier too, Robbie, I just want to interject, and I think, Lisa obviously would understand this, I think. It's very much like Empedocles' love and strife idea. If you go back and look at that and kind of get an idea of what he's saying there, he's very much almost explaining, like, in my opinion, birth.
Yeah, yeah. And that's, and I've theorized that, within the Masonic orders, you have the compass being the draws of the circles, that is the divine heavens, that is, more associated with the female. And then you have the square, which draws angles more associated with the cube or the male. And basically you see that G that's in the center, right? You're basically taking the female and the male and bringing them together. And that G is generation, is the creation of life. I think that is the most hidden sacred mystery of all the mysteries, which
isn't that's like the chalice and the blade coming together, that whole thing.
Yeah.
So you're just your thoughts, because this is so similar to like the Immaculate Conception. Robbie, your thoughts, was Jesus asexual? I mean, is that why? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, did he have children? You read Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and they say that the offspring of the children of Mary Magdalene and Jesus became the Merovingian bloodline. There is some argument, but if you look back into how these mystery schools function and the Essenes being taken outside of and being very what's the word I'm looking for? They basically rejected everything. They were limiting their food. They were limiting their exposure to the corruption of the city. They were limiting their sex. They were limiting, it's a good question for sure. But I could definitely see how, Jesus could have been a potentially asexual being.
I'm starting to lean that way. Sorry, go ahead, Judy.
No, that's okay, Julie. I just wanted to jump in because I find this to be a really interesting point. I think Robbie did a really great job fielding that. But I also think, as Buddhists, quote unquote, we don't believe in a fixed soul, but we do believe in the light. So what Robbie, Lisa, and Nick are all talking about, we believe in that, the light of conception, but we would say that that's karma. So that's your kind of connection to the people that you were born unto and then with. So rather than your soul has it's not really a soul, it's more of a spirit or it's not fixed, right? You can change, you have free will, you're malleable in the world. You're just your body can change as I'm sure Lisa knows, as a stress. I mean, Lisa definitely knows, but as a stress receptor, you changed depending on your inputs, your food, your environment, all of that. So the reality is we change, but yes, we immediately are born with the karmic connection to each other. And recognizing that's what Buddhism really is. It's that's the whole point, is to recognize, everything I do has a karmic implication and can impact not only myself, but the people around me, and not only in material ways, but in metaphysical ways.
Which just there's the term soul family, right, Jen?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we can use it. I mean, I'm fine to use the word soul. I personally don't believe in a fixed soul, so you can interpret that however you want. We really reject that eternalist idea of the soul carries with you through time. Mm-hmm. It's sort of dissipated in time. That's kind of the more of the
probably idea. we could all look back on our life and have these points where if you've met somebody, I'm not even talking romantically or whatever, but there's just people sometimes in that moment when you meet them or see them, there's a weird like recognition or like a certain feeling. I also had that with both my children, like when they were born, or even when like I was pregnant with them. Like there were certain things about them that it's like I knew was going to be, this is who you are. And then when I held them, I was like, oh, it's you. Like an old familiar.
Like you knew them already.
I already knew them.
That's why I mentioned like it makes you wonder if they've not always been with you.
I don't know if it's like with you, but maybe more like in that soul family or that.
They come down to be with you at that moment.
Right. Yeah. So,
but also,
I mean,
sorry, Julie, let me say this really quick about the Jesus, because you brought up a really great point about Jesus being asexual. So this is a question that Tantra actually deals with rather well, is that, and Lisa and I were talking about a little in the chat, there are different versions of preferences how to climb the tree, if you want to call it like that, if you want to articulate it like that. So being having a bachelor deity or bachelor god, that is desirable, as Robbie was saying, for people who are into radical shramana. So shramana just means radical asceticism. So it's like giving up all the materialities. So if your view is shamanic, of course, right?
Hermeticism. That's the word I was thinking of. Hermeticism. Go ahead.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but you're going to give up everything. Now, if your path is radically transgressive, then you're going to embrace the pleasures of the flesh. So it really depends on how you want, like how your cosmology is, how the system is that you get to where you want to go. So, right. And like, so this is the, I guess the Kibele figure of Tantra. Her name's Akajati, which means the one braid. As you can see, she only has one breast, one eye, one fang. And to bring up Nick's point about the eye falling out, if you look at her, I guess that's her left hand, she's holding a heart, a severed heart, and there's like a little string. And so it does look kind of like an eyeball. I didn't choose the best image to show that. I chose a more cool image, but you can see like she's blind. She only has the one eye. So it's only subtle, because when she has her physical eyes, she craves and she desires. Right. So the whole idea is that when she becomes blind, she only has her subtle or her third eye.
Right.
So she only can perceive the spiritual. So she realizes in her karma, oh, this is my cosmic function, is not to destroy the world, but to destroy perception. So it has like a much more consciousness layer. It's not like, as we were talking about this whole time, it's very much about consciousness rather than, it can be literal, it can be real, it can be also a metaphor, it can be also angels, whatever. But it's about you and your consciousness and your body. Because I think like Lisa and Nick make a great argument. It's about your eye and your womb.
Yeah. All right. So now when we trace the name Addis back from Attis, A-T-U-S, to Ates, A-T-E-S, all find a common meaning in the Caucasus region relating to the month or the moon, right? And it is also held that Addis came from the day that the full moon is visible, as the Etruscans related to the moon as Ittis or Itis, relating to lunar time, and corresponds to the Sumerian word Itu, which relates to illumination of the moon. This word Itu has been in Chaldea and in the Achaemenid inscriptions used in the exact same manner in regard to the illumination or the light, not the moon itself, but the light of the moon, right? And it's believed to have been perceived as a divine being in relation to the cycles of the natural world, from these names found in Asia Minor being Ates, Attis, as well as Attis, suggesting this to be the true origin of the nature of Attis. The moon god Min, or Mini, of Asia Minor has long been recognized for his similarities with Addis. Min is young like Addis, both dress identically, both wear the Phrygian cap of Addis, while also both using common attributes of the poppy, the pomegranate, and the pine cone. So, we can just see that this is something that is spreading culturally because of this ascended idea of this virgin birth and this means of, transitioning into higher forms of reality, right? Both Addis and man are seen with the crescent moon above their heads. These godmen, through their symbols, is a blossoming, nourished by ancient roots growing outward from Addis. I could just keep going on and on about, this is basically the notes I was writing for the Nimrod book, because Nimrod directly ties in with this as far as one of the cut up gods,
something again, you mentioned the crescent moon, and I was going to say it earlier, but I just forgot. When we were talking about I guess, conception and everything, I've often thought, and I think somebody might have actually said it to me. It may not be an original idea, so I just want to put that out there. The way I explained my experience with crossing the abyss, at the end, it is very much almost like kind of going out the same way I came in. I will see that eclipse and eventually turn into a crescent moon, and the black sphere will get pulled away from the white one. The poles will separate, and then it's an explosion of light, and I'm gone. So it's like, there's an explosion of light coming into the physical sense, and then when I believe I separate the soul from the body, there's an explosion of light going out. And I will see a crescent moon in my visual at some point when it starts to slowly pull apart. It looks like a crescent moon apart, and then
and you see that crescent moon in these male moon deities going back into man or Mani, coming into Addis, but you also see that crescent moon in numerous places of these numerous different god forms all over the earth.
Yeah, Toth, who's associated with the hermaphrodite.
Yep, and that crescent is the beak of the ibis in regard to Thoth, and it was considered also as a writing nib in regard to prophecy. So yeah.
I always associated the moon with being like a feminine energy, though.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, so Thoth, right, within Egyptian mythology, he rode in the moon, and the moon was Isis, basically, right? But Thoth was represented as the dark side of the moon, like Pink Floyd, which is basically considered to be the hidden wisdom of the divine feminine. So there is a direct correlation with the feminine, for sure.
I was going to say, because it controls it's supposed to, if you're living right, it's supposed to control your menstrual cycle.
Right. So. And the tides, the coming and going of the tides. I think it goes deep when you get into the moon and the basically creating the structure for life on the planet in regard to, the movement and not letting everything on Earth lay stagnant.
Ovulation can sometimes be connected to the moon too. Sorry, you guys go ahead.
No. Just usually in full moons, that's when you do. I don't know about female, but I do know living on a ranch or farm or whatever, you do have, if you have animals that are about to drop, it never fails. On a full moon, they'll all end up dropping at the same time.
And within the agricultural ideas of the moon, right, you would plant on a new moon when there's no moon, because what's going to happen is as the moon is building in energy and becoming more and more full, it's actually working on those plants to pull them out of the ground. So it in regard to the growth of, life itself in the plant form. So the moon is, what's that?
No, I always thought that, like at night when you're observing, like, your plants or whatever, like they look so alive at night.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they're growing, I swear to God. And like always children, when they wake up the next morning, like, you grew last night. Yeah. Right? It's like, it happens in the night.
Overnight. And that's traditionally you receive the energy from the sun. That is the vivifying and programming energy. And then when you go into that state of sleep or comatose, where the moon works its energies on you, that's when you're healing, you're growing, you're doing all the necessary things that, encourage health within the body, and decomposition on the opposite end as well.
I don't think that we know anything about what the moon really is, because it's like if you stand in the shade at night versus the moonlight, the shade is cooler than the moonlight. So there is like something radiating off of the bitch.
Off of the moon, yes.
And it's growing. It's like you said, things grow in the moonlight. Your ovulation, your menstrual. There is an energy force around the moon. Like, I'm so sick and tired of people being like, "Oh, it's a used car that aliens used to get here, and then they just abandoned it." And it's like, no way, dude. I can't get on board with that.
Yeah. You know what's interesting?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, even Kabbalistically, when you look where the moon is, it's even something that projects light out of it, and it's even called the image creator. But something I wanted to say before, forgot, and finally remembered. Something maybe, Julia, why you might be misunderstood, and I think it's a huge issue amongst, even the occult and conspiracy, or just in general, that something that's not noticed or looked at. When you want to look at these planets or even spheres on the Kabbalah tree, there's always going to be a male and a female idea to it. And I don't think that's widely known. It's just always thinking that this is always going to be male and that's always going to be female. There's always something with it. Like even with the moon, Crowley at one point, I think, thought he was a reincarnation of Afkonsu, or Afkon. I can't say it, pronounce it perfectly right now. That was a male deity of the moon. Most people didn't know that. Like, I think if you want to take a good idea of how to even explain, maybe like this could be correct. It's a theory of mine, of like the male and female aspect. The moon itself the structure of it would be the female, and then that light you're talking about reflecting off of it or coming out of it would be the male aspect.
I think it's awesome that those energies are balanced. I just don't think it's talked about much. That's all.
Right.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I agree with super profound. Sorry to Robbie. I just want to say that. Yeah, Nick is right on with that. That's even a tantric understanding. If you look at any tantric iconography, there's always a female or a male deity implied. Always. Even if they're solo, we call that ekavira, a solitary hero form. But even if they're like that, there's always little subtle implications that the dakini or the consort is in the image with them. And that's even a Kabbalistic idea. It's not just tantric, because it's really their breath. It's really the breath of God. That's really the Shekinah, the Shakti. So they're always there. So I agree with Nick. It's like the moon. Yeah. And you're right, Julia. It has there's a feminine element to the moon, but there's also a masculine element, because Nick and I have talked about this idea with like Thoth and Tahuti before. There's an idea that the time, so this is Bina, so 3, but it can only express into the world in 8. So in Hod. But then he can really only express in 9, because there's actually +1. There's time, right? So it's the 8 cycles +1. So that's why he appears, which is Yesod, which is 9. So you can see it's like the mercurial force, the masculine energy, has to travel over to the moon to actually take form. It cannot just take form in Hod. It has to come into formation onto the foundation. So that's an interesting way. I just thought what Nick said was super profound, and just want to riff off that. Sorry about that.
Even another way I want to even try to show that, and I didn't know this until the guy from Library of the Untold came on, or I listened to one of his things. Just again with this, Julie was saying the moon with birth, with that whole aspect. If you were to be taken out of the sun and put into a cave for like a month or two, you're not going to drop any eggs.
Yeah.
So you need the sun you need both.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's like yin and yang, right? Like there's a piece of each in both, right? Like it's never exclusive.
Complementaries, not polarities.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, I don't know if that has to do with the skin absorbing the sun, but your eyes are going to be taking that in as well.
Yeah. There's a theory that if you gaze upon the moon, especially a full moon, that it charges your pineal gland, especially at midnight. Like it makes it ready to receive all of the light the next day.
Right.
And the other thing that I wanted to say, Tyrian purple, the purple that was coveted by the royals, can only be produced by sea snails when you expose their secretions to moonlight.
Yep.
And that, I mean, immediately you see it and it's clear, right? It doesn't look like purple at all.
Right.
But then leave it in the moon, the next day it's purple.
Right.
Covered in
Scarlet purple. Yeah.
Or that phosphorescent seaweed or whatever, like that can make the water look like it's glowing and in the moonlight. Yeah, man. There's things to it.
The moon is the photo developer. It's the dark room. of the
You're
world.
right. It's like the dark room.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's neat. You know something
sure.
I want to toss in here too, and Lisa just reminded me of it, and I swear one day we'll actually cover it. In Crowley's Liber Resh, or his Resh thing, you're praying to the sun at 4 different times of the day. And if you start looking at it correctly, I think that you are seeing yourself actually priming your pineal gland for the way that you're supposed to actually get like full potential out of it. So I think like what she was even saying, I think you even see that in ritualistic work.
Yeah,
and real quick, sorry. What I also wanted to add real quick, and another reason why I thought it had something to do, I totally lost it, sorry, is again, even in that description, when you're talking about it, you are in a barge and Thoth is at the wheel. So again, you have another crescent shape and you have it associated with Thoth.
Right.
Well, even like going like in the sun 4 times a day to do like your ritualistic work, it gets your eyeball exposed to the sun at 4 different times, which is supposed to regulate your circadian rhythm and put all your hormones in a cascade in which they're supposed to function ideally and prepare you for sleep, which produces melatonin and allows all the growth and all the good things to happen, right?
Yep.
Interesting. Sorry, Julia, you were going to say something.
Okay.
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't know if Robbie was expecting the conversation to go this way.
No, I love it.
God
I love
damn.
it. It's great. It's great.
I didn't either.
We've talked about literally every possible aspect of life today. This is amazing.
It's
Love it,
that's
right,
why
Julie? It's
I
awesome.
like to dig into these topics, especially when people know what they're talking about.
It helps, yeah.
As far as so now we got into the details of the evergreen tree in regard to it being symbolic of everlasting life, in spite of the death of the winner. Here it is right here. We also see in the ancients character of Sylvanus, who they set up the Sylvian schools after. You see him all over New England, as far as Sylvian learning, right? But he was the woodland deity of the Saturnian Golden Age that was called the god of the pine wood. Very similar and related to Addis, right? And basically within the cult of Addis, they would have these sacred tree bearers because the symbol of Addis was represented by this tall standing pine tree, fir tree, depending on where you move within these different mystery schools, right? And so it was on the day, the 22nd day of March, being 322, right? That a pine tree was cut and brought into the sanctuary of Kibele, where it was treated as a great divine entity. The duty of carrying the tree was entrusted to a guild of tree bearers. And then we have the Zimmermann in Germany, which built the cathedrals of Germany, that were called the Zimmermann, which were the tree bearers as well. So just kind of tying that in, right? And then also at the same time, because we have Phrygia tied in with ancient Greece, right? In the year 322 BC, there is an ancient and eternal brotherhood of death that was formed in ancient Greece that descended from ancient Grecian society dating back to Demosthenes. And then if we look at the Order of the Skull and Bones, right, their records, the way that they keep the records within the Skull and Bones, they always add 322 years to whatever the current date is. So i.e. in 1950, they would record it as Anto Demosthenes 2272. So, another cult or secret society here that we're seeing that's playing with the calendrical cycle, but I think definitely ties back to this ancient function. And who was it? James G. Frazier in his work, he talks about they would basically hollow this tree out and they would make an effigy of Addis and put it in the tree, like Christ in the sarcophagus, or in the coffin, or Lazarus in the sarcophagus, and basically after 3 days they would resurrect the god and then burn him. And James G. Frazier said not only did they do that with Addis, but in Egypt they'd had a very similar ritual where they would hollow out a tree and put Osiris in and resurrect him up as Horus. So we can see the ties between all these different cultures.
Quick question.
Yeah.
I don't want to open up a whole entire new casserole of things, but you ever think about like Santos Bonacci and like he says all this stuff is the same story, just repeated over and over again in different, yes. Like even the Christ story. And I hate to say that because I am a Christian, but sometimes I listen to his stuff and I'm like, God damn, he's got a point.
Listen, I will say some of his old stuff, I didn't know he was into it, even though I listened to him in the past. Some people had sent it to me after I did the Eyeball series. He has said some shit that I've even said on this show. Just for some reason, people don't remember that stuff. He has actually some shit that I think is extremely deep, and I think he understands what magic is. Maybe he's blown out from fucking with it too much now, but that man was onto something at some point.
The very beginnings of his YouTube channel, like if you go back and you watch like the first couple videos, it'll make you think about stuff in a completely different way. Kind of like what Robbie is saying today, like this story that repeats itself throughout cultures, throughout time, and with the same like main character that does the same thing, and it aligns with the planetary system and like the zodiac, and it's all I don't know. It just made me think of that.
For sure. So now within the Temple of Addis, right, the drinking of wine was not allowed at all. And there was a legend that when Addis roamed the woods with Agdistis, being Mother Kibele, who deeply loved the beautiful Addis, even though not naturally adequate, while under the influence of wine, Addis confessed his love for the castrated androgyne, in which there is some thought about this cult being against the ideas of sexual pleasure, which we talked about, in purifying themselves in such a demonstrably bloody manner in regard to removing their generative organs, right? And in this ritual, it was also implied a sacred marriage of the initiate to the goddess herself in the form of what they call the hieros gamos, which is basically the divine marriage of the god and the goddess, or the goddess and the mortal, or depends on, but there's this essential idea of this bridal chamber, right? And this was a high level initiatory rite in ancient schools called the hierogamy of the mysteries, in that there was a holy marriage between Addis and the goddess Mother Kibele, just as Jesus is referred to the bridegroom in multiple passages of the Bible, as in John 4:4-42, where Jesus is depicted as the bridegroom Messiah who offers eternal life, right? And what do I have up here? Yeah, and in this sacred marriage, once the sacred marriage precipitated, the initiate would become a priest or a priestess of the goddess, potentially a high-level tantric cleric devoted to the mother. And the initiate of the cult participated in purification processes, trials, and degrees of elevation, fasting, and eventually the divine marriage in the bridegroom chamber, becoming a supplicant servant of the divine virgin goddess. Clement of Alexandria, who was initiated into the cult before his Christian conversion, relates that when being indoctrinated into the Phrygian rites, he was schooled to say, I have eaten from the tambourine, I have drunk from the sibyl, I have carried the kernos, I have stolen into the bridal chamber. And it basically just relates to the aspects of this sacred hieros gamos, considered by the Pythagoreans to be represented by the number 5, being halfway, as the marriage is halfway between earth and the heavens, being the merging of spirit and matter.
Damn.
Right?
That's a mind fucker.
That's an excerpt from a book. So,
which kind of gives a nod to the Pythagoreans' obsession with the number 10.
Right. The 1 and the 0, the void and the generative factor, the reproductive, again, back to the sacred mystic idea of generation.
And then 5 being that middle point.
Right. Between heaven and earth. Yeah. Definitely.
Sometimes I feel like I need to be smarter to understand this stuff.
You get smarter as you get older, and then you have to die.
Right. Yeah, it's like
as soon as you start having a clue, you're like, fuck, I gotta do this over again.
Yeah.
Even some of the stuff that Nick talks about with like becoming a magician, or like what it is to be a part of like this mystery type of religion stuff. I can't fucking stand some of it. Like, I'm like, maybe I'm just stupid. I don't know.
No, you
jumped into the middle of stuff. That's why.
Yeah. Beginning, when you're investigating this stuff, you don't understand any of it. But the more you're exposed to it, the more you begin to like see the cross references and how the dots connect, and the picture gets bigger and bigger. It's a gradual learning process. It takes years and years and years to go through, and
then you just realize you know nothing, and you're like, okay,
right, that's what I'm saying.
Sit back down again.
Yeah, but that's what I was going to say. Even where I'm at now, after all these years of study, I'm constantly coming into certain concepts and ideas where I'm like, I have no idea what this means. And so, you delve into it, you kind of, wash yourself in it and kind of try to understand what it is.
It's so vast and so beautiful. It's like this
so vast,
amazing tapestry. And I think sometimes as humans, we're on looking at the tapestry like too close.
Yep.
Because we have such a small perspective, right? But it's like God has the wide view, and he's like, don't worry, it's okay. It's gonna all work out, or whatever your viewpoint is. That's why it all looks different.
There's literally there's a song about that, and you probably watched it, Teresa. Is Prince of Egypt, when he goes and he meets his wife in the desert, the Ethiopian lady, and her dad is like, everything is a tapestry, and all the woven colors make up the entire picture. That's how I feel. Even like with podcasting and meeting like people like Jen and Nick and Robbie, it's like their perspective is so different than mine that it opens me up to like a ton of different possibilities of what reality really is.
Possibly is, and the mindscape is infinite. So absolutely. It's the finite versus the infinite, all within us. So now it was after this sacred marriage and the castration would happen. If you get into the Roman stories, basically it was called the Day of Blood. It was one of the festival seasons that they would have, and on the Day of Blood they would work up to it, and they would castrate themselves in a frenzy. They would doing these dances, and they have these swords, and they're cutting themselves, and blood's going everywhere. And at the height of that Day of Blood was when they would separate themselves from their generative force, basically, and they would throw it through a window as they were running through the streets, and whoever's window it went in had to basically get women's clothes and makeup and all the stuff for first aid, and go out and take care of them and put the divine feminine sacred garments on them and put makeup on them, and then they would become risen as a high priest of Mother Kibele, right? So, and then it was at an unspecified time in the ancient notes of Scalia that discussed the chambers of Labrim as being sacred subterranean places where the worshippers of Addis and Rhea who had emasculated themselves used to come to deposit their genitals, right? Marcius Mencius Felix, in his Octavius, relates that these broken instruments of fertility were afterward reverently wrapped up and buried in the earth in subterranean chambers sacred to Kibele. And then this goes back to James G. Frazier, that postulates that we may conjecture that in the olden days, the priest who bore the name and played the part of Addis at the spring festival of Kibele was regularly hanged or otherwise slain upon the sacred tree, just as Balder the Beautiful and the Making.
What?
This is something else that's repeated throughout multiple,
The
hanging on a tree and
getting into Kennedy and,
What happened to, not to be graphic, but what happened to the genitalia?
Yeah, they would go to this place called the Labrine, and basically they would take these units as they were wrapped up in they probably cleaned them and wrapped them, and then they would bury them in the earth. And I would imagine it has something to do with fertility, I know at the Tower of London, when they would castrate people, they would actually throw their members into the courtyard for the ravens to devour.
Oh my God. I guess circumcision doesn't sound so bad compared to that.
Yeah, right.
fuck. At least you still have some of it left.
Birds in the park eating dicks. What the fuck?
Yep.
What
That's the title of the episode.
Right there. Yeah, exactly.
I can't.
I can see it now.
So
A new
now,
festival, just
Yo,
born.
imagine they're like, they take one off and it falls out of its beak and hits somebody on the head.
Oh my God.
So, but now what we have to understand within this whole process, right, that this process was generally seen as being a voluntary process, entering willingly for the transmutation in a secret manner of ascension. This harvesting of the green corn is what they call this in some of the text, shocked the mind into a death or a near death-like experience, right? Creating a sense of transformation, salvation, and illumination of a divine madness of sorts, which Plato gets into extensively. But Sotagard, he believed that the eunuch priests put themselves in a permanent limity, irreversibly, placing themselves outside of ordinary human nature, being neither gods nor men, but something in between. So,
wow.
Okay, I have a question, and Jen, you probably need to correct me. So this belief system, this practice originated Mediterranean-esque, right?
I would
Didn't
say
corn originate? Do what?
Yeah. Go ahead. Jen.
Didn't corn originate in the Americas?
So that's what is said. But in my own personal experience and I think maybe you have had this experience too, some of the things that they say are indigenous plants,
right, that they call
actually have a much more universal distribution.
Right.
Because a really great example of this is actually Datura. They used to say, Datura inoxia is the only American variety. But actually, we have all three kinds that appear in the Americas and have for a very long time, perhaps pre-European colonization. So, but this also appears in India and all three kinds. And then it also appears in all the Himalayas and all of Asia, because we know we have Chinese medical texts from 3,000 years ago that actually detail the use of it. So we know these things must have been universal rather than geographically limited. So I don't know, to answer your question like really properly, Lisa. Like I don't know. If I'm going to give a theory, I actually think that probably they did originate. Like I think corn and tomatoes probably did originate in Mexico or the Southwest area, but maybe there was other points of contact. And obviously,
Yeah.
JJ was talking about this, like with the Templars and the.
So when you get into that idea, I've come across numerous places where they say that the Egyptians called wheat corn. So, it may have been and corn is a grass as wheat is a grass. So maybe any of these fruit producing grasses at one time were called corn. But as far as other areas of connection, you have within the Egyptian hieroglyphs representations of pineapples from South America. They were bringing cocaine from South America to preserve the pharaoh's heart within. And I actually have seen a couple places where they have ears of corn in Egyptian hieroglyphs. So yeah, I think it's synonymous. I think there was a global culture that was moving much more than we think possible. Yeah.
If you watch enough Ancient Aliens, you'll learn that wheat and corn came from aliens, and everybody had the shit at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And so specifically wheat and corn are alien.
Yep.
I'm not saying that's my opinion. I'm just saying what Ancient Aliens said.
No, I think that's a great point though, Julia, is because one thing that, well, like Robbie said, like corn is a poaceae, it's a grass family plant. So there are other grass family plants are actually extremely important for human history. Like many of the grass family plants are edible. One of the first grains in Asia was called Job's tear. Well, obviously they didn't call it Job's tear, but we call it Job's tear. And that's a very nutritive, very medicinal, actually edible grain. I eat it all the time. It's very delicious. It's not gross or anything. So, but what I'm trying to say is that like you look at the history, it's like millet. It's like it's not exact. It's the wheat culture came much later. And and I think that the grass component is actually often overlooked by a lot of like Bible conspiracy. I'm not throwing Christians in anyway. I'm just saying Bible conspiracy people and just general occult, like as Nick would say, occult conspiracy people. I think that they don't really know botany. And I'm not saying you have to be like, I'm not an excellent botanist myself. I'm just saying if you understand some of the connections between them, you can actually make more logical conclusions.
Yeah. And also if you get into the early Judaic texts, they talk about basically when Adam was ejected from paradise, that he was sent into the lowest realm of darkness and had to suffer down there but he was weeping and praying. They finally brought him up to this realm where we are now. And then he had a problem getting food. And he tried to drown himself in the river and God had to bring him back to life. And he was crying because he was hungry. And so one of the angels went to God and basically was like, he's starving. What are we going to do? And God, or the Elohim, basically took part of his own body and like rubbed it and condensed it down into the very first wheat germ or the wheat kernel. And then the angel brought that to Adam. And then Adam became the first farmer, associated with the red earth. And then the bread is what fed the growing and expanding civilization.
I was going to say wheat is mentioned so many times in the Bible as being spiritually significant. The wheat and the tares,
leavened and the leavened. And,
you're right. Yes. Yeah. I do think it's spiritually significant, especially if it comes from aliens. Fuck.
Well, that's interesting that, like, you're saying Adam's own flesh then became wheat, because then you have Christ becoming the Eucharist in the Mass.
Well, it was God's flesh that became wheat.
Oh, God's flesh. Okay. Oh, so then that makes sense. That, like,
even more. Yeah.
Even makes more sense. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Back to Melchizedek with the bread and the wine and the first sacrament. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now, let's see. Like Addis, as far as this figure that would demasculate and be risen to the state of, the priestess of the Kibele cult, right? Like Addis, the demasculated disciple emulates the secret of the mother of the mountains. And this secret of Kibele is that she is the hermaphroditic Agdistis, who herself was emasculated by a messenger of the gods, as we talked about earlier. And in the Hittite religion, before we're looking at 1600 to 1180 BC, Agdistis is also their sacred hermaphrodite. So it's just, let me read this last paragraph and then this will wrap it up. In some ways, it seems as though Attis and Kibele were an older form of this fertility worship that from Phrygia, in its translation into Syria, becoming Adonis and Aphrodite, and to the figures bring us closer to the original root of the origins of these mystery schools, in essence, in relation to Nimrod, Tammuz, Osiris, and the expanding, school as it spread globally. And that's it.
Wow.
That was awesome.
So
Barn burner, Robbie. I mean, literally.
Oh, yeah.
You crushed it.
thanks.
Always does.
Always. Yeah.
So-
Agree with Teresa on that.
So, but that's basically what I've been working on this winter. And that's
definitely worth
part
the
of the book that parts of that are direct excerpts from my book. So yeah,
That's awesome. I mean, I feel like I learned a ton.
that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Right.
That's great. That's great.
Something I did want to add about the whole wheat thing, I mean, Lisa could concur, and so could Teresa because she was in the series, so she knows what I'm talking about. I'm not crazy, but we did at one point kind of like show like what the Zanyos of Zin looks like underneath in your eye, and it does very much look like wheat, or almost depending on what way you're looking at it. And if you're showing, I think like there's like polyp things kind of in there, it almost looks like a lavender, which again is associated with Toth. The Zanyos of Zin in your eye is what actually makes your lens raise up and down. And that's when you get the whole change and everything starts going on inside your eye. I even question, when we talk about Yesod being the machinery or the imagery of the world, I often wonder, and it's called, considered a machine or a mechanism in a sense. I often wonder if it's actually talking about that, because that is actually what's changing the direction of light in your eye, if it's reflecting out this way or going back up that way. So I often wonder about like wheat, when it's always, you see it always kind of in a circular shape, and you're talking about rising bread, unleavened. Is it actually showing the whole rising of the lens in your eye? I know that's a little out there. And then just one thing I wanted to mention before we, everybody else says whatever, before we wrap it up. With this image right here, if you see that thing on top of his head, crescent, that's exactly what it starts to look like when I say the eclipse starts to separate from itself. And during that whole time, it's a little bit much, but this is just my theory because of my own experiences and my own visions. During that whole time, I'm always pressing on my pineal gland really fucking hard. And once those two things separate from each other, it feels like it snaps back and punches me in the head. And that's when I see the light and it goes. I often think about the whole way that a snake fights. Goes forward to strike and then pulls back when it's in flight. Fight
and the
in
Egyptians
flight
had the cobra on their forehead.
At the same time, just like Horus, who is a bird that is a warrior. Flight and fight at the same time. And I also conclude that that's exactly why my eyes change, because one is in fight mode and the other one's in flight mode at the same time.
Yeah, right.
So that's my whole idea.
Sorry, Nick.
No, go ahead.
The crescent. Oh, sorry about that. I'm sorry.
No,
I was so excited after you were saying that, because I was like, yeah, I mean, that just shows that having the magical experience is as good as like understanding the image, because that's what it looks like, a crescent moon, but it's really the eclipse.
Right.
And only someone who really knows would know that. Like a normative Hindu won't know that, won't be able to tell you. They'll be like, oh, it's the crescent moon of Shiva. No, it's the eclipse. And even the snake confirms it, because the snake is the god of the eclipse, right? Like the dragon, Rahu. So
I think you're even switching polarities at that point, which is why I get the snapback.
Exactly. And so he's even depicted as feminine, Shiva, even though he's a clearly a masculine figure. So he's gone through that hermetic process. He's arisen at Yesod, or at the moon, and the Shakti is there waiting for him. The feminine force at the moon is there waiting for him, but it's really always with him. But maybe she can't express herself fully until she's there. I think that's a really interesting idea.
It's like your soul pouring out of your head too. I always say it feels like it's just fucking like.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it is. It's like when they worship Shiva, could be considered to be like Jehovah or Rudra. They pour milk on his Ushnashnijaya, which just means his crown. That's the big bun thing that he wears. Mm-hmm. It's like a lump of flesh. Sometimes it's described. Sometimes it's like a dreadlock. It depends on the text, but it's to pacify the arising consciousness at Yesod, like to pacify him so he's cool and calm like the moon. So that's what the whole thing of the milk is. It's like pouring milk over the black stone. What color does arise? Turquoise like the day sky. So you're putting God to sleep. That's kind of the idea.
Awesome. Thank you, Jid. Yeah, this is a great illustration, man. Anybody else have anything? I know I kind of like took it over and got weird right there.
Oh, it's good.
I was just going to say something about the wheat because you brought it up too. It's one of the most genetically modified things that we have, and it's a damn shame because I love pasta, and I love bread. Motherfucker loves carbs. Okay,
I think it's a genetic. Like, we've eaten bread for as long as can record history. I think it's just part of who, and the fact that they've taken it and genetically modified it is an adulteration and an inversion of nature.
It's an attack on us, Robbie, is what it is, because the problem. Right. Well, and the problem is, I've been looking into it a lot lately, is that like Monsanto and stuff like this, they have popularized the idea of spraying all wheat products with folic acid, which your body can't even digest. Most of the time it causes horrible health issues. Fortified, if you see something on a label that says enriched wheat, fortified wheat, or folic acid, you need to stay the fuck away from it as far as you possibly can. The only type of wheat you should be eating should be organic wheat that's unfortified, not enriched, no folic acid. There is a form of folic acid, quote unquote, that's not folic acid that your body can absorb, but that's not what they're using. So it's just been weaponized against us, so that it's basically poison. Which sucks, like I said, because America is a nation that loves carbs.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you said folic acid was incorporated into wheat because wheat was a staple because so many of birth defects. And folic acid is folate, it's the B vitamin. And most of your B vitamins are derived from animal products.
Right.
But if you look at historical genetic lines, and Jen, please interject if I'm wrong. When you look at historical lines of wheat as well as corn, most of the ancient lines had a higher protein content than they do today. They were almost a complete meal or complete food with
shit.
A higher amino acid profile than they do today. And through so many modifications, all of the nutrient content has been brought down. And that's also because of soil. So the same type of things that we grow back in the day, you used to warm your house with wood, and the ashes would go into the soil and then basically, feed more of the microbiome of the soil, and then whatever. But if you do look at that, I wonder how much of it is maybe that it was a way to interject B vitamins, but maybe B vitamins were also not being, they were stripped of wheat in its plant form. Granted, I get the need for it, but I think what we've done is, and Robbie, you do this perfectly on Twitter, it's the simulacra of what wheat used to be.
Right. It's no longer wheat.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like this fake wheat.
It's the shadow of the
fake.
thing. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That we think of as the valuable thing that is, but it's not.
The shadow of its former self.
Right.
That's
But when
right.
you get into wheat, right, in the beginning, the very first time it was genetically modified was they took, and it was the same guy that genetically modified the ruby red grapefruit, right? But they used gamma radiation on the genome of wheat and basically bombarded it with radiation, these gamma rays, and they created bush wheat that would grow faster and would bush out with bigger kernels. So here you're talking about getting rid of the profile of the essential, protein and the amino acids, and basically they poofed it out super big so that they have to harvest it early before it's even done. Otherwise it breaks off and they can't harvest it with machines. But the guy that did that, he won a Nobel Peace Prize in food science for basically creating this big bush GMO wheat. And that was in the 50s when that happened initially. And since then, Monsanto's come in and with their cassettes injected new genomes for the glyphosate. So they have to spray everything with it so that it kills everything but that.
I was going to say that is like they've just taken it one step further.
Yeah.
Now it's like an unrecognizable plant. But
Right.
Frankenwheat.
Yeah.
Right, but think of it like if it was like manna from heaven, like this. Like, think of it if it really was given to us by the gods, quote unquote, wheat, this thing that you can eat that has all the vitamins and protein and like whatever, it'll keep you alive. And they've bastardized it to the form of wheat that we eat now. And it's like I said, I'm not like a super label reader because I do enjoy some things that are absolutely
I'm a super
for you.
label reader now.
Like I'll throw in a Stouffer's mac and cheese every now and again. Don't get me wrong, but
The Stouffer's isn't too
The
bad
wheat-
for mac and cheese. I've bought that one myself.
what the Stouffer's?
Yeah,
mac
I
and
have
cheese?
bought that one myself. It's not too bad actually.
Dude, it's delicious.
Yeah.
Like
It's
I can
solid.
eat
Don't
that
knock
for-
it.
Food science, though, they make it delicious. They make
Yeah,
it
they make
crave
it taste
They make
good
you
on
want it.
purpose.
They make
Speaking
it-
of
oh, yeah, on
granola,
purpose. 100%,
I don't understand this conversation. I'm totally granola, but that's okay. No, I did want to say something that Teresa was talking about in the chat, which was really profound, which is like exactly what Robbie's saying. Like Robbie's making a great point about weed, and then obviously Lisa made an amazing point about how they stripped it of its nutrients content. Well, papaya, they did the same because you cannot, modern papayas, if you've ever eaten a papaya or anything papaya flavored, that only comes out of the GMO industry. There is no papaya without GMO. It does not exist. Now, can you go to Mexico and find wild papayas? Yeah, I'm sure it's possible.
yes.
But it's very rare, and they've crossbred a lot with the wild papaya population. Now, papayas are really interesting because you can actually use them for latex. So the Aztecs did make condoms out of them, so prophylactic. It's also interesting because in Doctrine of Signatures, a papaya is shaped like a womb. So there are actually aborticefant qualities in the papain latex.
Seeds, yeah.
So again, it's showing like what Julia's saying, like it's manna from, I personally don't like it's not that I disagree with you, Julia, but I think that we come up with those things. Like we say, oh, we see this thing in nature, we take of it and we sort of, breed it, you could say. And then that's the divine process. It's like our interaction with it. That's just personally my how I think. So yeah, I think it comes from heaven, but
So do you think
it's in
that
our minds too.
Yeah, so Jen, do you think the genetic process of genetic modification is just part of the fractal that is a natural function of the evolution
No.
of species through time?
No, because we'll say as a gardener, I'm perfectly fine with hybridizing. I'm perfectly fine with doing like land race species. Like that's just normal plant horticulture, right? You're making things that are going to survive, be really strong, and last, especially for us, like severe winters, right?
Yep.
So it makes total sense. But there's a part where you're going into this inner or secret layer,
Right.
Like this thing that people can't see, this people that can't really know. You can't really know that fully because it's occulted in a way.
Right.
And so I don't think that is like a progressive thing. I think that's very Luciferian, as someone who is like a little bit Luciferian myself. Like I'm just saying, I think it's too much. I think it's like you're trying to be something that is not possible for us. So for me, I'm very, Sorry, Teresa.
No, sorry to interrupt you. It's interesting that like the two plants that they've bastardized the most is like very regenerative looking, like wheat and papaya. Like, come on.
And papaya, yeah.
And as somebody who's like, and corn, right? And somebody who's done carnivore diet in the past and like removed all breads like from my life for a time. I don't like fully do it now, but like for a time I did. And I can say, I think what happens to a lot of people is that their autoimmune issues disappear because they're actually allergic to glyphosate, not wheat.
Right.
Like you're just removing like all these toxins. It's not that actually like wheat is the problem for you. If you were to eat pure wheat, it's that all the additives and chemicals on the plants that we consume is the problem. And for some people, unfortunately, they're more sensitive to it than others.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you know what's funny is that vegetables, sorry, Lisa.
No, go ahead.
I just want to say vegetables actually do better without much, like flowers need tons of compost, they need mulching, they need everything. Like you really have to tend flowers. Vegetables just need compost or manure, and you're good to go. Like you're ready to rock. You don't need to spray them really with anything. If you know how to do it, you're fine pretty much. Maybe you'll lose a couple, but it's just, that's interesting from what you're saying, Teresa, is like that. You don't have to finesse vegetables that much. They're ready. They want to produce.
They want to grow.
They're like willing.
Yeah. Like they're just like, you could eat me if you want. It's fine.
Well, I was going to build upon what Jin was saying, and I promise this will be the last thing about vegetables, is that GMO technology, or how it came about, is through we borrowed that, process through virus technology.
Oh, yeah.
The way that viruses scan the DNA, they're looking for palindromes. Again, going back to the palindrome, right? When we watch the movie Arrival, how palindromes basically are modeling how time can exist, all at the same time. So viruses scan the DNA sequence for palindromes, and then it inserts point mutations, either takes away or inserts its own or whatever. And so that technology of how it works or how it behaves is exactly the basis of how we understood to do GMO. So we learned that from viruses. So when people say viruses aren't real, then where do we get the GMO technology from?
Oh,
because that
I gotta
to
say
understand how
now.
viruses do. That's how we developed GMO technology.
Yeah.
And so when Jim says
say,
it's not natural,
that was the whole. Are you guys fans of the Alien franchise, like
yes,
Covenant, Prometheus?
Yeah.
When they went in Alien Covenant to that new planet, like they were looking for wheat, they were looking for water, and they had manufactured like this virus that would shoot up out of the wheat, and it would like go in your fucking ear and implant you with like whatever the thing is. But like that's essentially what they're doing, is they're taking like our basic life force of like wheat, water, and they're injecting it with weird stuff. And I actually just watched this documentary, and they said if you eat pasta in Italy, you could go for like a fucking jog afterwards.
I experienced it.
You don't feel bogged down. You don't feel sluggish. You don't feel tired. And it's because they don't fortify or enrich their wheat products. It's just wheat.
Different. It is totally
so
different.
if you can get, there is a brand, I get it sometimes at my local grocery store, but if you can get imported pastas from Italy, they are way the fuck better for you than getting like Berea or whatever that fucking brand is that they have at Walmart. Like try to stay away from that shit. But I am only saying this because I love spaghetti. Like please do not fuck with my carbs. Like I love carbs. Don't fuck with my carbs. There are brands you can get that are not fortified or enriched, that are organic, imported from Italy, and it does make a difference. Just saying.
I say for sure. When I was there, I mean, again, obviously you're in Italy. There was a lot of pasta, and I was like, oh man, like I don't want to be, I'm on vacation. I want to be dragged down at all. And
Yeah.
you know, I heard the same thing that you had said, and I experienced it. I mean, I would eat a big plate. You know, I'd have lasagna for lunch, and I was on the go, still, you know, walking around Rome. Like,
Now,
I feel full, but I'm not fucking stuffed.
You'll lose weight there
Yeah.
with all the
Yo,
carbs.
I'm
You'll
almost
eat-
positive I did.
100.
You'll
You
eat
think that-
5
For the 10
times
days.
as much carbs and still be fine.
Yeah. Do you think
But-
that has to do with the beer as well in America?
Oh,
It has to.
But this is
Just
so many
saying.
things, guys. This is a whole other episode, right? 'Cause
Germany
it's
has
like-
purity laws, and whereas in America it's like food science. You know.
When Nick brought on the NDE guy, he was talking, and Lisa was on. I can't remember who else was on. I know it was Nick and Lisa for sure.
Gregory Shushan.
But yeah, him. He was talking about something like plants that contain a specific substance. I'm sorry, Lisa, I totally forgot now. But I remember thinking to myself, the substance he's talking about, hops also contains.
Oh, is it cannabinoids?
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Robbie. I'm so sorry about that.
Sure. Yeah, hops is in the cannabinoid family for sure.
Yes.
Yes.
And so it's really interesting that they would, obviously, if you tamper with the wheat, and it's not just like beer, it's also soy sauce. Like as
Yes.
someone who doesn't eat any gluten, I know that you have to carry your tamari with you basically if you're going to eat anything. Like I'm one of those people.
Yeah.
Would that tap into the whole phytoestrogen thing because
Yes.
of soy and
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
cannabinoids?
Yes.
And
That's a big
soy.
problem in Japan.
Yeah, soy
I've
they
seen
also
it in
use
China.
to reclaim aluminum out of the ground. Soy can come out of the ground with upwards of 22% aluminum within its makeup.
22.
So that's why you have to ferment it. That's why the fermentation process of soy is so essential. Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah, that's a great point, Robbie.
Mm.
That
Soy fucks
fermentation-
with my GI, man.
but you have to
You're
eat
like a
fermented,
fart
like Robbie's
machine.
saying.
Yeah, you have to
really
eat it fermented.
You have to eat it
You
Yeah.
can't eat it like edamame or
Mhm.
soy
Same.
sauce or yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Same with
modern soy.
tofu. Yeah, it
Yeah,
just
well,
you're
makes
supposed
me
to
fart my
process
ass
tofu.
off.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. All
You're
right.
supposed to what tofu?
No.
You have to eat it. You have to process it. It has to be a secondary process because tofu is just the pressing, the cold pressing,
Yep.
right, of the beans. My grandparents used to make it
Those
when they were
beans.
Yeah, so
Makes
basically you
sense.
have to cook it. Plus,
I don't like
you don't always have to cook it, but you have to apply some kind of fermentation or
Yep.
or you eat it with like Japanese people eat it with tons of pickled ginger, so that's obviously going to have like a carminative effect.
fermented foods.
Exactly. So
That's why I love kombucha. It's
Oh, yeah.
delicious to me. I love it. I feel like probiotics do the body good.
I haven't had that.
It's good stuff.
All right. Well,
Do you like vinegar?
Eh,
Do
Well,
you like apple cider vinegar or anything like that?
yeah. So when
'Cause-
when Lazarus was raised from the dead, they gave him a sponge with the vinegar drink, and from the research I've done, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's kombucha. So,
It has to be, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like the fermented
Yeah.
vinegar.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
You're
Wasn't that what they gave Jesus on the cross?
Yeah, vinegar.
Yeah.
yeah, the
Yeah,
vinegar
they
water.
called it gall
Yeah.
or something like
Yeah,
that, I
yeah.
think is what they called it. But yeah, it was
But it was a healing kind of
a healing drink.
drink. That yeah.
See, if Jesus drank kombucha, everyone should be able to get on board with that shit.
Yeah, there's the episode title. If
There we
Jesus
go.
Well, there's
drank
something interesting, Julia, is that fermented food is actually considered tamasic food, meaning like almost sinful food, because it actually brings you down to earth. It's not sinful per se, but that's one interpretation of tamas. It weighs you down. It makes you weightier. That's more of a
Earthier.
earthier. That's a perfect. That's an
Kapha
overphrase.
like. Yeah,
Mhm.
it makes you more
Yeah.
kapha in your energetic
Well,
field.
I'm from
Bring
the
me down to the
south,
world.
so pickled
Mhm.
pig's feet, pickled eggs,
Eggs.
pickles,
Pickled eggs.
Yeah.
anything fermented. I'm
Yeah.
getting down with that shit.
Well,
I
I don't
love
know.
that
My
shit.
Instagram feed is
Pickled
full of
okra.
middle-aged women touting the benefits of fermented food to mimic Ozempic. So
Yeah.
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
I'm just saying all in moderation, right? Like
Oh,
I
yeah,
like fermented
for
food.
sure. Yeah. I agree.
listen,
and sourdough
Robbie,
bread.
look what you've done today.
I know.
Look
I
at
know.
us.
You know,
fucking wild.
fun.
Yeah,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
this is
wild.
that
what
was great.
story
Yeah.
time does.
Yeah.
Nice.
That was awesome. Thank you very much, Robbie, and really everybody else as well too. That was.
I enjoyed the group of everybody chiming in and all the different perspectives.
Hell yeah, we talked about
best.
a lot of
It's
different
a
stuff.
modern day gymnasium of ancient Plato.
Absolutely.
You know?
Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Before we let you plug your stuff again, we'll have Teresa. Would you like to say anything as we wrap this up? Or you want to plug your show? I know you haven't done much recently, but plug in.
No, I've been busy doing the silly pops and stuff. But yeah, I do have the Spiritual Gangsters. If people want to go listen to old episodes, they're still getting listens. So like, that's cool. Thanks for checking it out. And yeah, please check out Silly Pops on my Instagram and website and whatever. You can always DM me about it. And yeah, thank you so much, Robbie. It was like a blast as always. So thanks.
Always. I enjoy hanging out for sure.
Phrygian. Let's go.
Thank you, Cardinal. And thank you to the whole group. It was amazing. Like a really fun roundtable, like a really great way to sort of like, before Robbie goes on tour, a really fun way to end. Like
I don't know. You can see my bag right there. It's packed.
That's hilarious.
I'm out the door in 3 days. So
I was trying to get a date from him in July, and he's like, "Dude, I'm not gonna be home until like August." It's like, fuck.
Summer, Robbie.
Almost September. So yeah.
But I will take the opportunity to plug at this end juncture and say that, you can definitely listen to my show, Threshold Saints. Alex Rivera will be my next episode drop.
Nice.
And it actually turned out really well. So I'm really proud of it. And there will be a part 2 to that. And then obviously, Welcome to Hyperborea. So it's this like the Gonzo Gnostic series that I've been working on X, and we do live and we talk about Kabbalah and Tantra and all and speculative Gnosticism and metafiction. So we're on Aether Wave Part 1. So that'll be a 3-part mini series within a series. So I'm doing it very Kabbalistic, very like, like how I'm taking a cue from Nick. So definitely check that out if you're interested. Live every Friday night on X, and right before JJ's show, before JJ and Nick do Fridays. So don't worry about that. But yeah, you can watch us and then jump on with them. So thank you so much, guys.
That's awesome. Thank you. I was gonna plug anyway for people who do that. I do highly suggest to go check out his spaces. I've jumped in there numerous times, a few times, and I'll listen to it like while I'm editing or doing stuff, and they get into some pretty deep topics. So I definitely suggest to go check it out. I think it's very well done. So thank you, Jen.
Thank you, boss.
Of course. Julia, would you like to let everybody know where they can find your amazing work?
Yeah. So obviously Cosmic Peach Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm just going to go ahead and throw my email out right now.
Go for it.
Because I always say email me. My email is ghost.peach@outlook.com. If you want to work with me, please hit me up at that email. I'm working on a sleep paralysis mini series, and I actually have another topic that I kind of want to bring on the Occult Rejects when it's ready. I just got to finish the presentation about a fucking whack ass serial killer I'd never heard of before that has links to all the fucking 3 letters, and I mean it is just batshit crazy. But anyways, working on a lot of fun stuff for Cosmic Peach Podcast. If you want to work with me, ghost.peach@outlook.com. Thanks for having me, Robbie. You're awesome. Teresa, love you. Jen, always insightful. Lisa, gorgeous, smart. Wish I was more like you.
No, Julia, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And for the the listeners, go check out this series that she's doing. We covered sleep paralysis. It did very well. People seem to really like it. So I suggest those people to go check out this series that she's putting out. It's going to be a banger if she's covering it. Thank you so much, Julia. And then Lisa, the Occult Reject Mad Scientist. What is going on? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was like late morning for me. So it was like brunch and having my coffee with the Occult Rejects. And this honestly, genuinely felt like we were sitting around the table, Robbie, and you were telling us a story, and we're all listening and chiming in. And it didn't feel like we were separated geographically at all. Yeah. So I genuinely thank you for the invitation, Jen, Teresa, Julia, Robbie, Nick. This was an amazing discussion, and I'm very grateful to have been a part of it. Thank you so much. And the only thing I want to plug is occultresearchinstitute.org. Check us out.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Lisa. I appreciate you coming on and always, putting in what you got to say. Robbie, please let everybody know where they can find all your amazing stuff.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody for showing up. I was a little anxious at first when I saw how many people might be here, but I think it like flowed so well, and just getting, everybody, you guys all know what you're talking about, and it's just great coming together in the meeting of minds and kind of seeing how it all kind of just blossoms and blooms. But yeah, I'm R Marks or Robbie Marks. If you want to check out my other stuff, I have my website, my Etsy, my podcast, my Patreon, all my social media. You can go and find me at my Linktree, which is Linktree RMARX, and that'll pull up everything. So yeah, thanks, Nick.
Oh, thank you, bro. I really appreciate your work. You help me keep putting out work I can be proud of. So thank you, sir.
Nice.
Again, all of yous, it was an amazing chat. We talked about so many things, and I really loved it. That's what I hope to see other people do, is what we do here, just amazing stuff. We made magic today. So until the next one, everybody be well. Later.